Well, if you're joining us live, you're joining us an awful lot later than scheduled, for which we apologise, but the weather has been atrocious. The circuit was enveloped in heavy fog until about 1 o'clock today, local time. We've had a very truncated qualifying session, and if you are a regular follower of the championship, you may be noticing as well that the race, instead of being 70 minutes, as is often the case for the first race of the weekend, is going to be over a 50-minute duration instead. However, despite the upset, it is still the championship leader, Andrea Montermini, who has qualified in pole position in the Vallorba course Ferrari. Montermini, who was just stunning last time out at Portimao, driving from the very back of the field to finish in third position. Sharing the front row of the grid with him is a driver who was victorious in Portimao, and that is Miguel Ramos. He and Nicky Pastrelli in the V8 Racing Corvette have been going very well. As we take a look at the full grid then, with Andrea Montermini and Miguel Ramos on row 1. They're both Super GT runners, essentially GT2 cars, but running to the open specs. GTS cars, which are the GT3 cars, on row 2, with Chris van der Drift and Marco Seefried, the local man for Rinaldi Racing. Row 3, Diedrich Schittoff and Roman Mavlanov in the SMP Russian Bears Ferrari. Row 4, Alvaro Barber and Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. Well up in row 5 is Nicolo Schiro in the DriveX Porsche, which he shares with the second of the Bitec McLarens in the hands of Rafael Suzuki. Row 6, the effervescent Lorenzo Bontempelli and the very rapid Auto Orlando Sport Porsche in the hands of Isaac Tutumlu. Row 7, Michael Lyons, who could have probably gone a bit better in qualifying, and Duncan Cameron, who won the last race, which we had the second race in Portimao. Then Miguel Torrell and Jackie Camp on row 8. Row 9 is a very warm welcome to the International GT Open for Brian Wong, the first Chinese-American driver to compete in NASCAR racing. And then on to row 10, Vacislav Maliv and Emilio De Guida. Again, a very warm welcome to Emilio De Guida to the championship. Freddie Kramer and Claudio Sadanovic on row 11, with Gabriel Gardel completing the field on row 12. So a full pack of cars, a 50-minute race awaits. And if you've never seen the International GT Open before, just to explain, they almost make a mandatory pit stop. That will come between 20 and 30 minutes of the race duration, so bang in the middle of the race, when they all must make their driver change as well. It is a rolling start in the International GT Open, the cars out on the formation lap behind the pace car. The grid for today's race set somewhat differently to normal, because it was just a 15-minute qualifying period with all the cars out on track at once. It was very, very busy on track, but it was the drivers who you'd very much expect to be at the front of the field who were able to emerge with the best times in fun. Probably the one driver you'd say who really missed out was Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. in the AT Racing Ferrari 458, although Taukanitsa involved in quite a hefty incident in free practice yesterday. The AF Course team on what's been a very difficult weekend for them, working very late into the night to rebuild that car. So maybe they've just got a couple of setup tweaks that they still need to make for that car to get it going quite as nicely as they want. So it is the Ferrari and the Corvette sharing the front row of the grid. We look a little bit low down the field. There is Lorenzo Bontempelli in his Kessel Racing Ferrari. There's Luca Filippi, Andrea Montermini's co-driver, watches on from the Vallorba course pit. Weaving around is one of the masters of the Nürburgring, Marco Seefried in the Rinaldi Porsche, which had a very unfortunate, a very brief debut in the International GT Open at Portimao 3 weeks ago, when the brakes appeared to fail on the car. Heading into the hairpin on the first racing lap, it resulted in him torpedoing Francesco Castellacci's Kessel Ferrari. Both cars very, very badly damaged. It's good to see not only that the Porsche has been repaired, but it is right at the front of the field, although second in the GTS class, because another car that has been getting quicker and quicker as the season's gone on, the Bitec McLaren in the hands of the former International Formula Master champion, New Zealander Chris van der Drift, is in third position. There is Michael Lyons, who comes into the Nürburgring this weekend hot on the heels of a brace of Formula 1 victories last weekend in historic Formula 1 championship at Brands Hatch. Michael Lyons, who somewhat uniquely amongst top-line international racing drivers, has really two motorsport careers, one in historics and one in contemporary GT cars, able to out-qualify his AF Course teammate Duncan Cameron. Cameron, who, as we said very briefly earlier on, won the second of the races at Portimao a couple of weeks ago with his teammate Matt Griffin. I think we can expect to see that car in the hands of Griffin going very, very strongly in the second half of the race. So the pace car is really bringing them down to quite a slow pace. They will then form up side by side, and then will be up to the vastly experienced Andrea Montermini to pace the field through. And when the lights flash to green, then we'll be going racing for 50 minutes here at the Nürburgring, the 5th race of the 2013 International GT Open. We are yet to have a double winner in the championship. Will we see that today? Well, certainly Montermini and Ramos both be very anxious to score their second victories of the season. Or will we see one of maybe the GTS cars coming through and claiming the honours? That said, qualifying, even though it only took place an hour ago, was in much damper conditions, so we could see the Super GTs to the fore a bit more as they come out to the final turn, maybe in a slightly ragged and disorderly fashion. Montermini does what he can to slow the pack down, see if we get a start this time around as they head along towards the start-finish line. And they certainly haven't gone up to racing speed, and so the race clock gets underway and gets ticking, but it would appear as if they're going to have another lap here and then form themselves up at the end of it, because they're all very circumspect through that first hairpin. This happened at Portimao as well, that we had an aborted start, so the Villorba course team watched the monitors, possibly confer with Montermini, and the race is underway. They're going at quite a genteel pace, but it is Ramos who's moved clear of Montermini. There's Nicolo Schiro. And Ramos brings the pace right down. Once more, still a fair degree of weaving going on. It's not quite clear what's happened here. Certainly the race is underway, but unless it's a significant trick of the camera, I don't think... No, we certainly haven't got the race underway, because again, they are beginning to form up side by side. And so, frustrating start to the race, but certainly they came out to that final turn in a slightly disorderly fashion. It's a little bit tricky here to get a side-by-side rolling start at the Nürburgring, because the last chicane, you've got absolutely no option but to go through it in single file, and so that meant that Montermini then came onto the start-finish straight with quite a big margin over the rest of the field. So hopefully this time around they'll be all much more closely bunched. It means that the blood pressure continues to rise in the garages. It means that the tension continues to mount, and for those that were looking for maybe a very strong early start to the race, then frustration abounds. It's an opportunity though to get some heat into those Dunlop tyres, because it's only 8 degrees air temperature today. It really is very, very chilly. There's also quite a sharp breeze. All the cars in the championship do run on the controlled Dunlop tyre, which is obviously a different width according to the different cars, but is the same compound. And again, with the multi-mark nature of the International GT Open, managing that Dunlop tyre compound over the course of the race duration is a real art that must be mastered by the teams. So this time around, they go through the slightly quicker cut-through chicane, and then Montermini brings them into side-by-side fashion much earlier, so we should be good, hopefully this time round, to get the race underway in earnest, because although the clock has started ticking, the race has not really begun, but this looks much nicer. They make a magnificent sight as they come out of the final turn, getting ready to start the 5th race, the 2013 International GT Open, and this time we are very emphatically going racing as they all fan out wide. And Alexander Taukanitzer Jr. diving to the inside. He's gained several places as we arrive into the turn 1 hairpin. It's Andrea Montermini, Villorba Course Ferrari, who leads, and he pushes Miguel Ramos out wide. Also, Siegfried pushed wide by Taukanitzer Jr. It means that Chris van der Drift in the Bitec McLaren could well be leading by the time they arrive into turn 2, although I think it's Montermini who has just squeezed back through. No, it's van der Drift on the brakes into turn 3 who has snatched the advantage. So yes, there it is, the Bitec McLaren. Chris van der Drift leads. Andrea Montermini is in second. In third place is Miguel Ramos. Fourth place is the second of the Corvettes with Diederik Schittoff at the wheel. And van der Drift, well, that GTS McLaren evidently working very nicely, and Schittoff likewise fancies his chances to overhaul Miguel Ramos. Alexander Taukanitzer Jr. up into 5th. 6th place is Marco Siegfried. In 7th then Nicolo Schiro in the DriveX Porsche, and he's got Rafael Suzuki in the second of the Bitec McLarens behind him as they head through the hairpin at turn 7. Marco Siegfried and Alexander Taukanitzer Jr. busy doing battle, but Siegfried, given his pedigree here at the Nürburgring, certainly on the cold tyres, will be maybe a little bit quicker than Taukenitz Jr., who's got Nicolo Schiro also to worry about. Everybody would appear to be cleanly through the opening exchanges, and Van der Drift pushing very, very hard at the wheel of the McLaren. And Taukenitz Jr. now under pressure from Nicolo Schiro, Rafael Suzuki, and also Michael Lyons, who has gained a couple of places off the line. He is then in pursuit of the Biotech McLaren of Suzuki. He's got Lorenzo Bontempelli just behind him. It's Montermini in pursuit of Van der Drift. Hits the brakes into the chicane towards the end of this first lap of the race. Then we've got the two Corvettes flying in formation, being caught by the Rinaldi Porsche of Marco Seefried. A very tight group behind as Montermini thinks about the move on Van der Drift, working through the final turn and sprinting on to complete the second lap of the race. But the first racing lap, and Montermini might be able to use the straight line advantage here of the Super GT class Ferrari 458 to launch the inside of the Biotech McLaren. That's exactly what he does, and he gets the car stopped perfectly for turn one. Does the block manoeuvre on Van der Drift, no way back through for Chris, and instead he's now going to have to concern himself with Miguel Ramos, who's looming large on his tail. Then we've got Dietrich Schittoff under pressure from Marco Seefried. Before we've got Alexander Taukenitz Jr. with Nicolo Schiro, Rafael Suzuki right behind him. Here's another look at the first corner, and contact between Taukenitz and Marco Seefried. That was the only, I think, scrap where it turned into something more than just handbags. And actually, Seefried fortunate not to pick up damage and to be pointing in the right direction. Now Seefried pulling clear of Taukenitz Jr., who's got quite a group of cars behind him he needs to concern himself with. Montermini having snatched the lead, pulling clear of Van der Drift, who's got Ramos on his tail, and it's great to see the Drivex Porsche and Nicolo Schiro going so strongly, because they've had a difficult time at Paul Ricard and Portimao, but now they're really mixing it with the AT Racing Ferrari 458. Climbing into turn 8, and Schiro, last year's European F3 Open champion, in feisty form. Likewise, Marco Seefried, as he tries to get on terms with Dietrich Schittoff. In the fight for second and third, it's Miguel Ramos in the Vodafone Corvette, who's just tucked in behind Chris Van der Drift. Take another look at the move that promoted Andrea Montermini to the lead of the race. Classic Nürburgring manoeuvre from the former Formula One racer. Amongst a great list of accolades on Montermini's CV. We've got one driver who has been summoned to race, one team manager rather, summoned to race control immediately. That is for the Seyfarth Mercedes in the hands of Miguel Toril. I suspect that's not to sample the biscuit selection in race control, because we've got immediately written in block capitals on our timing screen, and we could well see a challenge for second position here, as we've got problems behind. Taukenitz has spun and Schiro goes into the gravel trap. That's at the very back of the shot. At the foreground, Miguel Ramos thinks about lining up the move on the McLaren of Chris Van der Drift. Van der Drift, though, able to withstand the challenge of Ramos. Ramos then draws alongside as they work through turn 2, and Ramos trying to spin up the big Corvette, draws again alongside Van der Drift and swoops around the outside into turn 3. Really nice move there from Miguel Ramos, and it potentially leaves an opening as well for Dietrich Schittoff to elevate himself onto the overall race rostrum. He is the next driver to take his turn to really challenge Van der Drift. And then we've got Marco Seefried looming large in 5th, which is probably the bigger concern for Van der Drift, because they are fighting for class lead, and Van der Drift gives plenty of room to Dietrich Schittoff, who dives through and clambers into 3rd position. Schittoff, who was last year's Dutch Supercar Challenge champion. Let's have another look at the aftermath of the disagreement between Nicolo Schiro and Alexander Taukenitz Jr. And Schiro may well struggle out of there. He seems to be wedged in, unfortunately, against the barrier at just the wrong angle. So it's Montermini who leads, trying to pull clear of Miguel Ramos. And then Dietrich Schittoff in 3rd, in 4th. Van der Drift and Seefried doing battle. Marco Seefried dives to the inside of Van der Drift. This is the battle for the lead of the GTS class. And Van der Drift, having been maybe prepared to concede ground to the Super GT cars, certainly doesn't want to allow Marco Seefried through. But Seefried pushing very hard in the Rinaldi Porsche, doing everything he can to come to terms with Van der Drift in the Biotech McLaren. They jink through then the chicane and on towards turn 14, the final turn on the lap. Can't see whether or not there are yellow flags out there potentially the recovery of Nicola Schero's car. We have another look. That move from Marco Seefried very late into turn 10, very optimistic as well. Van der Drift, though, able to just hold the position around the outside line. As in the midfield, plenty of scrapping going on. And Isaac Tutumlu trying to make the move on Lorenzo Bontempelli. And Bontempelli sees Tutumlu coming, gives him plenty of racing room. At the same time, Bontempelli is a wily character. He knows a few tricks of the trade, so although he gives Tutumlu room, he certainly doesn't make it easy for Tutumlu to get through. And Isaac Tutumlu doesn't gain the position on Lorenzo Bontempelli. They're fighting over 9th and 10th. Just behind them in 11th is the AF Course Ferrari of Duncan Cameron. Although Tutumlu, again, in the Autolando Sport Porsche, has got a good run on the Kessel Ferrari as they swoop downhill. It's Bontempelli to the inside at turn 5, but for turn 6, that's going to swing in favour of Tutumlu, who is able to find the rest of that 9th place away from Bontempelli. Bontempelli, though, immediately looking to take the fight back, and Duncan Cameron as well is part of that scrap. Cameron shows himself to the inside line of Bontempelli, doesn't actually commit to the move. Instead, Bontempelli just trying to line up for as good an exit as possible from the exit of the hairpin turn 7. They begin the climb on up the hill. The battle just going ahead of them is between Roman Mavlanov and Michael Lyons. This, the fight for 4th in the race overall and for the lead of the GTS class, is still just held by the magnificent Bitec McLaren of Chris van der Drift. But he has got Marco Seefried asking all the right questions at all the right times at the moment. Seefried not quite able to pick his way past the McLaren, which certainly in the first meeting here at Paul Ricard looked to be very, very tricky to handle, but with a very, very strong squad in the Bitec McLaren team, the car has just really developed. The setup is now exactly how the drivers want it to be, and it's becoming an extremely competitive proposition at just the right point in the season, because we're still, relatively speaking, in the early stage of the year, because at the conclusion of today's race, there's still 11 races to go in the 2013 International GT Open. Duncan Cameron again lining up for the move on Lorenzo Bontempelli into turn 1. That's going to get very, very tight, and Bontempelli is almost tagged by Duncan Cameron, and Cameron in turn was getting increasingly tentative on the brakes, maybe just realised he had overcommitted. And Bontempelli now looking to take the challenge back as Roman Mavlanov and Michael Lyons busy going hammer and tongs to each other. It's Mavlanov in the SMP Russian Bears car that's on the grass, and Lyons tries to defend from the former Formula Renault 2-litre racer, but Mavlanov looking to push his way up clear of Michael Lyons. They are fighting for 7th and 8th in the race. They're also fighting for 4th in the GTS class, because on his own in 6th position clear of this battle is Rafael Suzuki in the 2nd of the Bitec McLarens. So down into hairpin turn 7 they go. Here is a replay, and Lyons just forcing Mavlanov out wide. Roman Mavlanov doing, in the tradition of all racing drivers, the obvious thing and just keeping his right foot firmly planted. But it's Lyons who has been able to keep his nose clear. But what that's done is back Mavlanov up into the Isaac Tutumlu, Lorenzo Bontempelli, Duncan Cameron battle. So a fantastic scrap forming between them as they accelerate out of turn 11. The road falls away from them, and they have this very fast swooping section that will bring the 6th lap of the race to an end already. We are only 7 minutes away from the pit stop phase of the race, and you do wonder just how early Duncan Cameron will come in to hand over to Matt Griffin. We've still got the yellow flag out at the final turn, which is in honour of Nicola Schero. I'm not sure Roman Mavlanov saw it, because he decides to really go elbow to elbow with Michael Lyons, and Lyons, unimpressed, moves back across, makes contact with Mavlanov. Isaac Tutumlu is trying to become part of that scrap as well. This is going to be very intense when they arrive in towards turn 1, and Mavlanov and Lyons showing absolutely no love lost between the pair of them. Lorenzo Bontempelli could be the winner here. He just launches his Kessel Ferrari to the inside of the road, and Michael Lyons gets edged out very wide. Isaac Tutumlu also being sandwiched between Lyons and Duncan Cameron. And the upshot of all that is that Michael Lyons, who has rather lost out, the big question is going to be whether or not those yellow flags that were displaying on our monitor as being in the final turn were still there when Roman Mavlanov launched that move. Anyway, Mavlanov is the driver who's come to the fore of that scrap, He's brought Lorenzo Bontempelli with him for company. Michael Lyons has then got Isaac Tutumlu and Duncan Cameron. Let's have another look at it. So Mavlanov squeezes his way through. Lyons gives him racing room. Mavlanov tries to take a little bit more. Lyons says that wasn't very nice. Moves back across. Tries to deter Mavlanov, but in the end it was the Russian driver who was able to prevail. And now Michael Lyons has got the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche of Isaac Tutumlu all over his tail, and Lyons having a relatively poor exit from the hairpin at turn 7. Will then feel it's a very, very long climb up the hill towards 8 and 9. Lorenzo Bontempelli also rather enjoying the opportunity to try and go into battle with Roman Mavlanov. All the while, ahead of the field, it is Andrea Montermini who leads by 8 seconds. Then Miguel Ramos and Diederik Schittoff lying in formation together in 2nd and 3rd. It's still Van der Drift who holds off Siegfried in 4th and 5th. The fight for GTS class honours. Now that Mavlanov has made that move, Lorenzo Bontempelli are breaking clear. Michael Lyons, who is under real pressure for his position from Isaac Tutumlu into the chicane. It also means that Duncan Cameron is part of that battle as well. To say that Cameron will almost certainly come in right at the opening of the pit window here, because he is being delayed a little bit by this GTS class squabble. In clear air, you'd say the AF Corse Ferrari should be running a little bit more cleanly than that. So flashing through Mavlanov and Bontempelli, they fight over 7th and 8th, and then Tutumlu is going to try and take 9th position away from Michael Lyons here. He breaks very, very deep into turn 1. He almost goes out to visit the marshals. Therefore, by the time he's rejoined, Michael Lyons has gone back past him. Although Tutumlu still able to carry an awful lot of corner speed, and he could have the inside line here for turn 3 as Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. heads into the pits. So clearly feeling the lingering after effects of the altercation with Nicolo Schiro in the very early stages of the race. Duncan Cameron, he's definitely got the pace at his disposal in the number 21 Ferrari to overhaul Isaac Tutumlu in the Science of Sport Porsche. And at the same time, you'd say that Tutumlu has probably got the pace on Michael Lyons as well. Certainly Tutumlu thinks about a dive to the inside at the bottom hairpin. Not really likely to find any joy there. And then looking to carry as much exit speed as possible, because then you can, if you use the slipstream correctly, you can get close enough, possibly challenge into turn 10. That's what Lorenzo Bontempelli is trying to do to Roman Mavlanov. Michael Lyons just got that half a car length or so that he needs over to Tutumlu to avoid that challenge. And then we've got Duncan Cameron looking like an ever-present shadow, and also you just caught a glimpse of him in the background racing his way up to that scrap. Alvaro Barber, who came within the whisker of winning the championship last year in the Ombra Ferrari this year in 12th, but closing in. So here's the race leader, Andrea Montermini. Montermini has got a huge lead over Miguel Ramos, 12 seconds as Tutumlu and Lyons go side by side into the chicane. And where will Isaac Tutumlu rejoin? He joins clear of Michael Lyons. Lyons flashing his lights at Tutumlu, saying, hey, come on, you gained a little bit of ground there. Not really sure that's going to have the desired effect on Isaac Tutumlu. And Lyons, as a result of that, actually running wide through the final turn and giving Cameron his opportunity to see it again. Yeah. I think Lyons would argue, and maybe rightly, that Tutumlu stood absolutely no chance of making that corner. Tutumlu would say he didn't have the room to turn in. In the meantime, we see a change for second position, and it's Diederik Schittoff who moves up ahead of Miguel Ramos. So number 7, then Diederik Schittoff in V8 Racing Corvette moves across clear of Miguel Ramos. Great to see the Corvettes dicing wheel to wheel. And Bontempelli's also gained ground on Mavlanov. He goes up into 7th. Then we've got Tutumlu, who has got Duncan Cameron on his tail. Michael Lyons slipping back with Alvaro Barber, as we predicted, joining in to the fight for 9th position. Just 1 minute and 50 seconds away from the pit window opening, and Duncan Cameron, who will be carrying an extra 15 seconds in the pits in addition to the mandatory minimum pit stop time, result of he and Matt Griffin's victory last time out, is looking increasingly anxious to elevate himself clear of Tutumlu in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche. But Tutumlu, well, he's not maybe had a consistent ride over the past couple of seasons. He's been pretty successful. Last year he was racing in the Porsche Super Cup as well as the odd appearance in the World Touring Car Championship. He's an experienced driver. one who's proved to be extraordinarily competitive this year. The Auto Orlando Sport Porsche, who's just not really had the luck in terms of the result. Alvaro Barber homing in on the tail of Michael Lyons. So this, what was a six-way scrap, has now really begun to pair off. Who's the most likely to make a move? You'd have to say it's probably Alvaro Barber in the Umbra Racing Ferrari, the red and blue car. He thinks almost able to pull around the outside of Michael Lyons. Couldn't quite succeed in that. So instead, he'll set about trying to get a nice, good run through this final turn, using the slipstream maybe. It's given off from Michael Lyons to challenge on the brakes into turn one. The pair of them now fighting over 11th and 12th position. Duncan Cameron also quite keen to make the move, and Isaac Tutumlu. Tutumlu a little bit spurrily on the brakes into that first corner, but he gets the car all pointing in the right direction at the time that he needs it to, and able to propel himself out of the corner with some rapidity, and withstands the pressure from Duncan Cameron for the time being. So it's Andrea Monterni who leads from Diedrich Schittoff by 13 seconds. Schittoff about 1.5 seconds clear of Miguel Ramos. Van der Drift is in fourth, leads the GTS class in the Biotech McLaren from Marco Seefried and Audi Porsche in fifth. Rafael Suzuki is in sixth, and Alvaro Barber is now in 11th. We made that move on Michael Lyons. Lorenzo Bontempelli in seventh, Roman Mavlanov in eighth, and then this man, Isaac Tutumlu, in ninth position with Duncan Cameron, completing the top 10 as the pit window opens for 10 minutes. The driver changes are going to be on, and the race could thus turn on its head once we've worked through the pit stop phase. The team's all very well drilled in the pits. And Marco Seefried would very much like to hand over to Vadim Koge as the driver leading the GTS class. How deep into this pit window is Diedrich Schittoff going to go before he hands over to Bert Longin? Seefried trying to still force that move on Chris van der Drift. It's easy to forget because Chris hasn't had a regular drive for a couple of seasons now. Just what a potent force he was in single-seaters a few years ago, and a driver who was at one stage very much thought to be following in the footsteps of Scott Dixon as being a New Zealand single-seater star. Instead, he's transitioning to sports cars, where he's building a very successful career himself. Into the pits has come Miguel Ramos. He's the first of the front runners into the pits. That is to hand over to Nicky Pastorelli. Pastorelli, who was victorious in last year's FA GT Championship in terms of one race win en route to 8th in the championship. So 8th in the championship with a single victory the year before that. Building on a very successful single-seater career that eventually took him stateside to the Champ Car Championship, category that Andrea Monterni raced in as well during the 1990s. Also in is Miguel Toril. That is to hand over to Jan Seyfarth, and we can expect to see the Seyfarth Mercedes absolutely flying now in the hands of Jan Seyfarth. Michael Lyons is in as well, and that will be to pass the baton to Matteo Beretta. So if you are just joining us here at the Nürburgring, we have got just under 28 minutes of the race remaining in the first race of the third round of the 2013 International GT Open. It's Andrea Monterni who leads in the Villorba Course Ferrari from Diedrich Schittoff, and then in third place is the Biotech McLaren of Chris van der Drift. And in the pitch, you just saw a glimpse there of the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche, which is about to absolutely fly in the hands of Jerome Bleekemolen, who is making his seasonal debut in the championship this weekend and is very, very potent. The SMP Chambert's Ferrari giving off considerably more smoke than I think would be ideal. Monterni continues on his way. He leads the race by the best part of 15 seconds here. He will hand over to his co-pilot Luca Filippi momentarily, but it's actually Monterni who is single-handedly leading the championship at the moment, because last time out at Portimao, the meeting coincided with the Spanish Grand Prix, and Luca Filippi was on commentary duties for the Sky Italy channel, and so was unable to compete on the Sunday, and so that means that is Monterni who has now moved in the single-handed championship lead. Right into the pits as well comes Rafael Suzuki. That is to hand over to another Formula One driver, Giorgio Pantano. And Pantano has been smiling impishly all weekend. I think he really fancies his chances today in the Biotech McLaren. So Suzuki comes to a halt. And it is Giorgio Pantano who hops in. So we're just about to reach half race distance. imagine that Andrea Montermini is going to go quite deeply into the race as well before he takes the opportunity to pass over to Luca Filippi. Montermini, so experienced in the Ferrari 458 as the pits now get very, very busy. Indeed, Jan Valois taking over from Jackie Camp in the V8 Corvette. That's to the head of the shot. We've also got Joel Comathius about to take over from Mario Cordoni at the back of the shot, and as well we have got the SMP Russian Bears Ferrari with Kirill Ladygin taking over from Vladislav Maliv. All this is very good news for Andrea Montermini. He is about building his advantage. Meantime, got a good scrap shaping up here with Lorenzo Bontempelli getting on terms with Claudio Sadanvitz. And Bontempelli quite clean to move past Sadanvitz if he possibly can. Yet to pit in is Bontempelli, to hand over to the former Formula 2 race winner Nicola Di Marco. Actually a very evenly matched driver pairing there, because although Di Marco maybe has got a couple of years on Lorenzo Bontempelli, Bontempelli has put all those years to very, very good use competing in these Ferraris, and so he really does know the tricks. In fact, he's on the tail of Michele Rugolo, who has taken over from Claudio Sadanvitz, which would explain why that car has emerged slightly out of sequence. It would also suggest that it would be a good idea for Lorenzo Bontempelli to head pitwards fairly quickly, because Michele Rugolo is a very, very rapid driver, having risen up through the single-seater and then GT ranks in Italy before moving to race internationally. Jan Seyfarth, so having plenty of fun. Let's take a look at some of the overtaking moves going on throughout the field. There is Luca Filippi then, who is poised and ready, waiting for Andrea Montermini to arrive in the pits. I suspect it could well be on this occasion, because the entire Valour course team are in their garage as Jan Seyfarth barges aside Joel Comathius. I suspect it's Matt Griffin who's also right on his tail, having taken over from Duncan Cameron. Certainly the poise and body language of the car would suggest that that's Griffin. So our timing screen's not updating us today as to when the cars have been into the pits, but that looks like it is Matt Griffin. As another driver change there, it's Brian Wong who clambers out, and Brian Lavio will take over in the Corvette, which was up into 8th at the point at which Brian brought the car into the pits. And that's actually a very quick driver combination, because Brian Wong has raced with considerable success in the USA, and Brian Lavio, a former podium finisher in the International GT Open, as well as being a professional rally driver at the very start of his career. Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin trying to close up through the field, as into the pits then is Andrea Montermini. Luca Filippi jogged round, takes over from Montermini, and I think Montermini will be rightly pleased with that performance. Thundering through then, so what's turning into a fairly robust battle throughout the GTS class. It's Kirill Ladygin just clear of the Seyfarth Mercedes in the hands of Jan Seyfarth. Then we've got Matt Griffin, who's moved up ahead of Joel Comathius, and also Teo Beretta and Jerome Bleekemolen very much part of that fight as well. Change for the Rinaldi Porsche squad. That's Marco Seefried, who is out, and into that car will be Vadim Koge, who's probably not got quite the same degree of pace as Marco Seefried, but certainly that car is well up the order for Vadim to take over. And yes, Jan Seyfarth's moved clear of Kirill Ladygin, and then we have got Matt Griffin and everything he can climb up the order. The fight at the moment, by the way, is for essentially 10th position, but by the time we've had the pit stops, that will be a fight for much higher up the top 10. Griffin flashing his lights, trying to move clear of Kirill Ladygin. Ladygin having absolutely none of it. And it's a real challenge here. Parts of this Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit are quite narrow and single file, and therefore you've really got to pick your moment to overtake. As rejoining the race, and essentially rejoining the lead of the race, is going to be Luis Razzia. So Razzia it is who emerges ahead of Luca Filippi now that the pit stop penalties have adjusted themselves. So it's Razzia who essentially leads the race. Luca Filippi is in second. Vadim Koge has come out as well. The big question is then going to be what of the progress of Nicky Pastorelli and also Bert Longin. Big thumbs up from Andrea Montermini, and quite rightly so, because he has once more driven his heart out and given the Valourba course team every opportunity of scoring their second victory of the season to build on the one that they achieved in Paul Ricard. But for now, the challenge for Luca Filippi is to overhaul Luis Razia, and really, there's any justice in the world, these would be two drivers we'd be talking about at the Canadian Grand Prix next weekend, because they both have been on the cusp of Formula One for a couple of seasons and both are very deserving of their chance. Instead, it's a real treat to see them out on track and racing wheel to wheel in the International GT Open. They arrive into the hairpin at turn 7 and then accelerate on up the hill. Bert Longin it is who takes over from Diederik Schittoff, and that more than likely going to be the last of the pit stops here, because we're 30 seconds away from the pit window closing, and then we've got just 20 minutes of racing ahead of us. So it will be not at the end of this lap, but at the end of the lap after, because a number of the pit boxes are past the start and finish line here at the Nürburgring, when we can get a true assessment of order. Also, Alvaro Barber has done everything in his power to give Stefano Constantini, who takes over in the Umbra Racing Ferrari, best opportunity of a good result. Still Filippi asking all the right questions. Luis Razia, and he goes through, and that could be a decisive move in this race for Luca Filippi on Luis Razia, the Bitec McLaren driver, unable to withstand the Valourba course Ferrari. That was a nicely judged move from Filippi. The big question there is, where is Filippi positioned in relation to Nicky Pastorelli? So flashing through is Luca Filippi. Still got Luis Razia on his tail. They've dropped Vadim Koge, not unsurprisingly, on this lap. And Koge is being caught by Giorgio Pantano. Pantano in the Bitec McLaren, continuing to climb up through the field as we take another look at the move by Luca Filippi on Luis Razia. Traditional Nürburgring move, brings back memories of Michael Schumacher in 1995 on Jean Lacey. That from Luca Filippi. Also very smart driving as well from Luis Razia, giving all the space he needed to, but no more than that. So Montermini watches on the pit wall. Stephen Earle at the wheel of the Kessel Racing Ferrari in pursuit of Jan Versluis, Joel Comathius and Jerome Bleekemolen. Now this could be a good battle. Bleekemolen in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche, on his tail former International GT Open champion Joel Comathius, and a pair of them looking to get onto terms with Kirill Ladygin as well. Comathius certainly pushing very hard, trying to close in on Bleekemolen, who alongside his successful career in sports cars was also a real star for the Dutch team in the A1GP Championship going back a couple of years ago as well, and was one of the front runners in that championship all the way through to its demise back in 2009. Bleekemolen looking pretty anxious here to try and make the move if he can on Ladygin, who runs a little bit wide through the hairpin. That's the opening that Bleekemolen needs, and he pushes the Russian Bears Ferrari out wide and sprints up the hill, flicking through turns 8 and 9 as he certainly pulls clear of Joel Comathius. So it's going to be at the end of this lap, the car's currently on now, that we're going to get an indication as to whom is where, and the answer is that it is Bert Longin who leads the race by 5.8 seconds. So here's the car that leads, number 7, and leading it by 5.8 seconds is Bert Longin from Luca Filippi. And then in third position is Luis Razia. Fourth place we've got Vadim Koge, and then in fifth Giorgio Pantano. Fortunately, the timing screen we've got at our disposal here in the commentary box isn't quite updating as quickly as it should be, as we see the move from Giorgio Pantano on Vadim Koge. So that's another place gained for Giorgio Pantano. We've said that he was in the mood for this today, and that is certainly proving to be the case. So the big question here is the relative pace of Bert Longin versus the pace of Luca Filippi. And that's really the battle that we're going to be watching for over the remaining 16.5 minutes. There, flashing through the screen, was Longin. Filippi looming large in his tail. Then we've got Luis Razia, who is in third place in the race overall. He leads the GTS class as well. So this very impressive stuff from Luis Razia. It's his teammate now, Giorgio Pantano, who is taking the opportunity to try and chase him down best he can. The other driver to watch for is Nicky Pastorelli. So there is Razzia. Here is Bert Longin, the race leader. And we've seen Corvettes in the past hold on for magnificent victories under pressure, particularly last year at the Hungaroring with Miguel Ramos, who was being chased down by pretty much the entire field. What sort of pace is Longin doing now at the wheel of the V8 Racing Corvette in relation to Luca Filippi as Longin accelerates over the start and finish line now, and he does a lap time of a 2-minute 1.435. Luca Filippi does a 1-minute 59.420. He brings the gap down to 3.8 seconds exactly. And crucially, Filippi was 2 seconds quicker than Longin last time through, which means in the matter of 2 or 3 laps, Filippi will be on terms with Longin. That's it, if Longin can hold on, he and Dietrich Schütthoff will be the 5th set of winners in 5 races in this year's International GT Open. The other driver to watch for in terms of pace is going to be the progress of Nicky Pastorelli in the second of the Corvettes, because he is about a second lap quicker than the McLarens up the road ahead of him. So it is Luis Razzia who's there in 3rd, Giorgio Pantano in 4th. Nicky Pastorelli is in 5th position. He's only 4 seconds back from Pantano, so Pastorelli still stands a chance here of maybe getting onto the podium. Longin, meantime, will be on the radio to the team, just waiting to be appraised of the progress of Luca Filippi. And of course, as the old adage in motorsport goes, it's one thing to catch the car in front, it's quite another to find your way through, and that's certainly what the V8 Racing squad will be saying to Bert Longin, because all the while Luca Filippi looms ever larger. Matt Griffin also doing what he can to race his way up through the field. He's just moved clear of Stefano Constantini, so that should put him up into 9th position. They have both got Jan Seyfarth on their tail. Jan Seyfarth, I think, who would be hoping to maybe even challenge for a GTS class podium, which is quite possible that he could achieve that. Just under 14 minutes to go. Jan Seyfarth in pursuit of Stefano Constantini. He should be able to move clear of Constantini fairly quickly, and that's exactly what he's going to do into turn 10, or does he? No, Constantini able to cover the line just in time. And in these, in certainly GT terms, sprint races, what you don't want to be doing is spending too much time caught behind the car in front, because that really can take away your opportunity to chase up through the field. And certainly Seyfarth will feel that he is a little bit faster than Stefano Constantini, but he's struggling at the moment to possibly prize the opening as they jink through the final chicane. And again, Seyfarth looking on every single corner to try and make that move on Stefano Constantini. For the time being, though, he just can't quite do it. We have got 13 minutes to go, and Seyfarth continues to flash his lights on Stefano Constantini. All the while, though, they've got Jerome Bleekemolen in the second Auto Orlando Sport Porsches closing on his tail. Again, Seyfarth tries to brake as deep as he can into turn 1, force the mistake from Constantini, but Constantini's got that Ombra Ferrari exactly where it needs to be. Another good scrap that we could have as we finally get the move into turn 3 from Jan Seyfarth on Stefano Constantini. Absolutely perfect stuff from Seyfarth in the Mercedes. As here's the fight for the lead coming together, and Luca Filippi has taken him exactly 1.5 laps to get on terms with Bert Longin, and also to add to the challenge for Longin, he's just bottled up behind the ailing AT Ferrari of Alexander Taukanitsa Senior. Montermini watches on anxiously, because when you're in the traffic, you've got to pick your moment perfectly, and Longin flashing his lights at Taukanitsa, the Belarusian driver, trying to let him know that he's there and to please move aside. Taukanitsa moves across, takes the racing line to the final turn. I suspect that Longin is saying some words in Dutch that you really don't want to learn, and Belgium as well, that you really don't want to learn at the moment, because he is furious with Taukanitsa, flashing his headlights repeatedly, and he's still not been able to pick his way past Taukanitsa. which he's able to do now into turn 1. Felipe also thinks about trying to challenge, and Longin outbreaks himself, and Felipe's going to take 2 cars in one go here and moves into the lead of the race. Or does he? Longin's got the inside line through turn 2. It's going to be a case of who's feeling the boldest on the brakes into turn 3. Longin's got the inside line. Felipe has got the traction around the outside, or does he? No. He goes in a little bit too deeply, so it's Longin once more who is able to maintain the lead of the race here. The Belgian driver, though he has got Luca Filippi all over his tail. We have got just under 11 minutes to go, and it seems difficult to imagine Longin able to hold off Filippi till the end of the race, given the rate at which Luca Filippi has closed on to tail of Bert Longin. But what we don't know here is the relative state of the Dunlop tyres on each car, because Filippi into turn 7 there was looking just a little bit sideways on the brakes. He's clearly pushing very, very hard the wheel of the Vauxhall Course Ferrari, and likewise in the Corvette. And of course, with Andrea Montermini challenging for the title here, what he doesn't want to see happening is Filippi maybe going for something a little bit too ambitious, resulting in damage to the car and no points. So therefore, Filippi has got to pick his moment very nicely here, but he could have a run possibly into the chicane, because he closes up onto the tail of the Corvette through turn 12, and Longin moves across the conventional racing line. This is Filippi's opportunity, or at least he thinks it is. He shows himself in the mirrors of Bert Longin, but Longin claiming the racing line, jinks through a chicane. And the challenge here for Luca Filippi is going to be, at what point does he pick the move? In the meantime, Nicky Pastorelli has got a good run on Giorgio Pantano here. This is for 4th position, and it goes in favour of Nicky Pastorelli. And Pastorelli stands every chance of getting onto the overall race rostrum. Pantano still 2nd in the GTS class as well, in pursuit of his teammate Luis Razzia, who leads the GTS class. And it's Razzia who is 5.5 seconds clear of Pastorelli. Is still no change in the lead of the race. Now, it's this section of corners, turns 1, 2, 3, 4, which is really Filippi's best opportunity, because the Corvette in a straight line is very, very potent indeed in relation to the Ferrari, and therefore Filippi either have to do something incredibly bold on the braking zone after a long straight, or try and force the mistake from Longin after a series of mid-speed corners. That said, Longin doesn't really make friends with the apex as he heads through turn 5 and then out of turn 6, downhill towards turn 7. Again, Longin running wide and luridly up over the curbs, and this could be Filippi's opportunity on the brakes into the bottom hairpin. Again, Filippi braking very deep, trying for the outside track here. Longin forced to cover the inside line, but then he just plants his right foot on the loud pedal, and the Corvette, as well as causing the earth to vibrate, moves up the hill at quite some pace. Jinking then through 8 and 9, and Filippi still right on the tail of Bert Longin, but it's Longin who leads the race. And now Filippi's got the move into turn 10, and they make contact, but Luca Filippi goes through. Longin closed the door, but too late, and it's Luca Filippi in the Vauxhall Course Ferrari who takes the lead of the 5th race of the 2013 International GT Open, to the light of the Vauxhall Course team and Andrea Montermini, but that was a little bit closer than they would have wanted. But Longin then in 2nd position. I don't think he's going to be under real pressure here from Nicky Pastorelli, because Pastorelli has still got to get himself onto terms with Luis Razzia, and that battle is the best part of 10 seconds behind the one for the lead of the race. So with 7.5 minutes remaining, it is Luca Filippi in the Vauxhall Course Ferrari who now has the advantage from Bert Longin. Now, has Longin got any answer for Filippi further back? Vadim Koge is being assaulted from all directions by, first of all, Jan Seyfarth, and then the two Auto Orlando Sport Porsche in the hands of Dimitris Demerikos, first of all in the more multicoloured car, and then Jerome Bleekemolen just behind him. And this is the fight for 4th position in the GTS class, and there's contact between Demerikos and Koge, and Vadim Koge is pushed into the spin, and around he goes, and just too many cars trying to get into too small a space there, unfortunately for Vadim Koge. To have another opportunity to look at the initial battle between Filippi and Longin. This was fantastic driving from Bert Longin. He really held his ground, and it forcing Filippi into the mistake. See Filippi getting the better run through the first turn, and then Longin inside line held his nerve. Eventually though, Filippi able to get through despite that slight panel rubbing between himself and Bert Longin, and applause from the Vallorba course team. 6.5 minutes remain then. Luca Filippi is the race leader. Second place is Bert Longin, and Longin dropping back from Filippi, but even so, for he and Dietrich Schittorf, this would be by far their best result of the season. It'd be their first trip to the podium of the season as well. Longin, who wasn't racing at Portimao a couple of weeks ago, it was Schittorf who was down to do both races single-handedly, but in fact got eliminated on the first lap of the second race. Headlights ablaze here from Bert Longin, who is driving very smoothly, very consistently, and staying with Luca Filippi. Still, he has the best part of a 10-second advantage over Luis Razia. Luis Razia has got now 3.5 seconds clear of Nicky Pastorelli in the fight for third and fourth. So whilst the gap between first and second extends itself, the fight going on for third and fourth positions gets ever closer as we move into the final 5 minutes of the race. Another look at Dimitris Tverikos, Vadim Koge with the Russian driver unfortunately coming off second best, and to add insult to injury, Tverikos has just been served with a drive-through penalty for the evasion of the chicane that Isaac Tutumlu did a little bit earlier on. So for the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche, goes from bad to worse, and really, from however many angles you look at it, does suggest Tverikos maybe a little bit too optimistic there. Here is the fight for third and fourth, and Luis Razia has been caught by Nicky Pastorelli. The gap down to just 1.3 seconds, and Pastorelli setting his personal best lap of the race last time through as he closes up onto the Brazilian driver Luis Razia. Razia, who came within a hair's breadth of racing Formula One this year. He was last year's runner-up in the GP2 Championship with 4 victories to his name. He's now going to have to work very hard to withstand the pressure from Nicky Pastorelli. The pair of them diving past the ailing Vadim Koge. That takes away an overtaking opportunity for Pastorelli, but you would suggest that Pastorelli, given the way he's just inexorably closed in onto the tail here of Luis Razia, will probably be able to get through maybe before the end of the lap. Certainly turn 10 is a potential opportunity, but the McLaren is a little bit more nimble than the Corvette. So Razia in that third position, leads the GTS class as well, so he doesn't necessarily need to overly dispute this with Pastorelli, because he'll still claim an emphatic class victory, but the chance to finish in the top 3 in the race overall is still not to be sniffed at. That said, Pastorelli making the move into the chicane. Through he goes, and snatching third position away from Luis Razia. The next thought for Razia is that his teammate Giorgio Pantano last time through was half a second quicker. And the gap between Razia and Pantano is only about 4 seconds. There is Pantano at the very top of your shot, and over the line they've come now, and Pantano has brought that gap down by a second on this last lap. Partly that was because Razia was busy defending, but also partly, as you can see, the Bitec McLaren moving on the brakes. Maybe the Dunlop tyres are just beginning to get a little bit worn out. Well, now that Pastorelli's up to third, it is very unlikely that he's going to climb any further, because although he's a second lap quicker than Bert Longin, he's also 10 seconds behind him, and we have got a lot less than 10 laps left in this race. Even so, for Nicky Pastorelli and Miguel Ramos, continues a very good run of results for them. But what about this? The fight for third position in the GTS class. It's Nicola Di Marco in the red Ferrari, number 51, who leads the fight, but he's third in the GTS class. Fourth in the class is Jan Seyfarth, and then fifth we've got Jerome Bleekemolen. Now, any of these drivers could get themselves onto the GTS podium, and we speculated that Seyfarth stood a chance of doing that when he came out of the pits. Nicola Di Marco, though, race winner at international level. Kessel Racing Ferrari, a very, very nicely sorted and set up car. Into the pit lane has come Vadim Koge, and Rinaldi Racing's rather tough induction to the world of International GT Open racing continues. But this is what it is all about, with the Ferrari leading the Mercedes, leading the Porsche. We've got 2 minutes to go, and one of these cars should be on the GTS class podium, but which one will it be? Jan Seyfarth again thinking about lining up the move here on Di Marco, but Jerome Bleekemolen, therefore, in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche, climbing all over the tail of Jan Seyfarth. They head out of the turn 7 hairpin, and Seyfarth knows he's quicker than Di Marco, but he also knows that if he overcommits to the move, that is going to be the opening that Jerome Bleekemolen needs. on towards turn 10, and Seyfarth decides to go for it. He launches the inside and cutting across his bows there. Nicola Di Marco, Jerome Bleekemolen using his experience, just say, well, I'll brake a little bit earlier. You know what? You guys sort it out, and if we go into the last lap, which they will next time around, then I might just pounce. Instead, Seyfarth contemplating lining up the move on Di Marco again. Bleekemolen all over the tail of Seyfarth, and it gets very, very tight into the chicane. We are into the last lap of the race. It is Luca Filippi who is leading, but this is the fight for third in the GTS class, and Bleekemolen shown towards the pit lane entry by Jan Seyfarth, who is defending very robustly here. It means that Nicola Di Marco, who's been able to pull quite some margin now, third in the GTS class, and Bleekemolen has got the opportunity here to move up into fourth in the GTS class, because as they hit the brakes into turn 1, he's got the inside line. Seyfarth in the Mercedes thinks about turning across the Porsche, thinks very hard about turning across the Porsche, but Bleekemolen goes through. That is also for 7th in the race overall. As just a couple of corners from home then, the Vallorba course Ferrari, Luca Filippi it is, who climbs over the crest, arriving into turn 10. And Luca Filippi and Andrea Montermini, they're going to be the first double winners of the year in the International GT Open. They're going to continue, in the case of Montermini, to extend his advantage ahead of the championship, and they have just done everything absolutely perfectly today. The clock about to tick to 0. The Vallorba course team ready on the pit wall. Great to see some sponsors on that car this weekend as well, which I think really shows the success that they've been having in the opening couple of rounds of the season. It's been another very, very successful day today, as through the last turn heads Luca Filippi. The checkered flag is ready and waiting, and the win in the 5th race of the 2013 International GT Open goes to Luca Filippi and Andrea Montermini and Vallorba course in the Ferrari 458. An excellent second place for Bert Longin and Diederik Schittoff in their Corvette, and then third place for Nicky Pastorelli and Miguel Ramos, the V8 Racing Corvette. And then the GTS class flying in formation, the Bitec McLarens. Victory for Luis Razia from Giorgio Pantano, but Jerome Bleekemolen's moved clear of Nicola Di Marco on the final lap to snatch third in the GTS class, and then there's contact between Di Marco and Jan Seyfarth going into the chicane, and well, Di Marco has rejoined, having gained a lot of advantage and in position to challenge Bleekemolen as they head through the final turn. But it is going to be third in the GTS class for Auto Lando Sport Porsche, and Emilio De Guida and Jerome Bleekemolen trailing home behind Giorgio Pantano and Rafael Suzuki, and then Luis Razia and Chris van der Drift, who win the GTS class. What was a fantastically lively race as ever for the International GT Open. Fortunes ebbing and flowing throughout, but again, it means an additional 15 seconds in the pits for Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi tomorrow, because their remarkable run continues. That car has not been off the podium thus far in 2013. In 5 races, they have been victorious twice, they've been third twice, and they've also had a second place. And today is one of those wins, climbing up to 6th position very impressively, Matt Griffin in the AF Course Ferrari, and that is a car that's qualified on the front row tomorrow and stands every chance of being extremely competitive. Here was Jan Seyfarth and Nicola Di Marco into the chicane, and the pair of them have been battling ever more frantically as the race had progressed, and Seyfarth couldn't pick his way past Di Marco. Grinning ear to ear, Andrea Montermini, and rightly so. He and Luca Filippi making a very, very potent driver pairing. And the Vallorba course Ferrari just perfectly set up. It was a car that went very, very well here last year at the Nürburgring. Let's take a look then at the final results, with the win for Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi. Second place, Diederik Schittoff, Bert Longin. Third place, Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli. Fourth, and winning the GTS class, Chris van der Drift and Luis Razia. From second in the GTS class and fifth, Rafael Suzuki and Giorgio Pantano. Sixth was Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin, and then third in the GTS class was Emilio De Guida and Jerome Bleekemolen. A race that was fortunately very, very low on retirements. We lost Nicolo Schiro very early on. Also lost the Gabriel Gardel, Alan Collari car as well somewhere along the way, but otherwise absolutely brilliant race. Very, very close racing, spectacular stuff. And an excellent win for Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi. And Filippi really had to push very, very hard for that, making the move on Bert Longin, who in turn drove very, very well to see off the pressure from Filippi for as long as he did. All smiles. Villorba course, big thumbs up. And rightly so, 2 victories this season, the first driver combination to score 2 victories. And they will very shortly be appearing on the podium to what was an absolutely scintillating race, spectacular performances, battling going on throughout the field. And big round of applause as well for the combination Diederik Schittoff and Bert Longin. Their best result of the season, and comfortably so, in the International GT Open. And then third place for Nicky Pastorelli and Miguel Ramos. For Biotech McLaren as well in the GTS class, this has been just what they wanted it to be, because the car has been getting quicker and quicker all year. As we take a look at the highlights of the race, when we did get underway after again an aborted start, it was very, very tight into the first turn. Alexander Salkins Jr. is maybe the most optimistic, making contact with Marco Siegfried, pushing him wide as Andrea Montermini tried to make the early running. So Talknitz Jr.'s race went from bad to worse when he and Nicolo Schiro came into trouble, whereas the early leader, Chris van der Drift, was eventually overhauled by Andrea Montermini, who then sprinted off into the distance. We saw some great battling going on throughout the field. Roman Mavlanov and Michael Lyons, in particular, in their Ferraris, were going elbow to elbow during the first half of the race, maybe a little bit more than elbow to elbow on occasion, in what, as you can see, was a very frenetic battle for the lower places within the top 10 of the field. Then saw the Corvette of Miguel Ramos fall into the clutches of Diederik Schittoff, who was able to overhaul Ramos, who elected to then be the first car into the pits, handing over to Nicky Pastorelli. After the pit stops, it was Jan Seyfarth in the Mercedes who was on the charge. Marco Siegfried put in a sterling drive in the Rinaldi Racing Porsche, and he handed over late in the window to Vadim Koge, as did Andrea Montermini to Luca Filippi. Filippi came out of the pits, immediately past Luis Razia, who had emerged ahead of him, and then set off in pursuit of Bert Longin. Jan Seyfarth continued to pick his way out through the field. Stefano Constantini was one of his early victims. Nicky Pastorelli also clambered up the order to get himself onto the rostrum. This was the move then that sided the race. Luca Filippi squeezed by Bert Longin, but he was alongside by the time that Longin turned across him, and that was sufficient to give Filippi a lead that he wouldn't relinquish, taking the flag in the event by 5 seconds to give he and Andrea Montermini their second win of the season in the Villorba course Ferrari, with Nicky Pastorelli and Miguel Ramos completing the podium behind Bert Longin and Diederik Schittoff, who were the runners-up. It's never really warmed up today here at the Nürburgring. At least the on-track action has been red hot, but it is well below 10 degrees, and the breeze has picked up once more. GT Open will, of course, be back tomorrow for their second race of the weekend, which will complete the third round of the season, and promises to be another very entertaining race. So let's have a look then at the Provisional Drivers' Championship after the 5th race of the year, with Andrea Montermini leading the way from co-pilot Luca Filippi, then Nicky Pastorelli, Miguel Ramos, 40 points back. And they're only 5 points clear of Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin, who are racking up the points quite nicely, with the Talconitzers still in the mix as well. Miguel Toril also trying to climb up the order in the Seyfarth Mercedes. The Villorba course mechanics crowded beneath the rostrum, ready to greet their drivers. So first of all, coming onto the podium in third place, we're going to have Nicky Pastorelli and Miguel Ramos. Another trip to podium for Pastorelli and Ramos. They're third on the bounce. A first visit to the rostrum this year for Longin and Shitov, and then delighted Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi, their second win of the year for Villorba course. Ferrari, whose team manager, also comes up to the top step of the rostrum. National anthem then in honour of the winning team. Villorba course based in Italy. And now the presentation of the trophies. First of all, the third place trophies, as ever at Nürburgring. Always very sizable trophies, very spectacular trophies as well. The second place trophies too, for Longin and Shitov. And then Luca Filippi and Andrea Montermini, with the winning team being Villorba course. You can hear their mechanics down in the pit lane giving them a huge ovation. And the drivers posing photos. Now, we may well not have champagne on the rostrum because, unfortunately, this weekend has started under a very sad cloud with the death of mechanic Pietro Stragliati, who was working with the Maserati organisation this weekend, but is also connected to the AF Course team, who was killed in a tragic paddock accident on Thursday. And so the decision taken by the drivers not to celebrate with the champagne on the rostrum this weekend. And of course, the thoughts of everybody from GT Open in the paddock this weekend with Pietro's family. Opportunity then to enjoy the super slow motion shots of the top three cars in the race as we move on after the applause subsides. GTS podium then, with in third place the Orlando team of Emilio Tegida and Jerome Bleekemolen. Then Bitek, McLaren wrapping up top two spots. Rafael Suzuki and Giorgio Pantano in second, and Chris van der Drift and Luis Razzia, the GTS class winners. Super performance from the Bitek team. They've worked so hard in the first couple of rounds of this season to get those cars developed and up to fine form. So that's it from myself and Evans here at the Nürburgring for today. Join us tomorrow for more action from the International GT Open.